Jan 2nd, actually, I remember I start getting emails from London. Hey, we'd like to book a tour. Where do we book? And I was like, what? I've not done anything. I don't even have a license. I remember responding to one of the first of those emails saying, I haven't really launched, but how do you know about this business? The lady responded back saying, you don't know? You've just been mentioned in the Telegraph. Lara Dunstan had written this article on 36 hours to spend in Dubai, and she had inserted us at 12 p.m. And actually that kept us busy for the first 3 months. It continued, and to date, I'll have people listing the Telegraph as their source of information.
From the Coffee and IC Network, I'm Chirag Desai. And on today's show, the people behind Frying-Pan Adventures, Dubai's first food tour company, talking about the days they started out 5 years ago, to the company whose tours continue to rank among the top things to do in Dubai, not to mention multiple TripAdvisor certificates of excellence. So big caffeinated hello to the women behind the company and now co-hosts of the Frying-Pan Diaries, Dubai's first food podcast, Chief Executive Muncher of Frying-Pan Adventures, Arva Ahmed.
Hello, great to be here.
And hello to General Manager Farida Ahmed as well.
Hi.
So I'm going to jump right into the question that's on everybody's mind. Why does Arva get a funky foodie title and Farida get a very traditional general manager?
That's just because I'm the more creative one and I come up with my own titles.
That's not true. We've actually had several brainstorming sessions over this, and it turns out my name is needed more on the Frying Pan license than Arva's is, so I need a more formal title.
Exactly, and Dubai government doesn't take too well to titles like Chief Executive Muncher.
Well, that's really unfortunate. I will not be able to register Chief Espresso then. Let's go back to 2013. How does ILiveInAFryingPan.com, a food blog, or more rightly, the niche food blog, trying to capture the history and the culture about the food in Dubai, become Frying Pan Adventures, like the food tour company, right? What triggers that kind of a transition?
So this is what happened. I'd started a blog in 2010 when I moved back from the US. And it was, at the time, just a very open-ended, I'll write about everything I eat. Wasn't very specific at all. But then I realized over time that as we started to get more and more invites for free food, and I think, Chirag, you are very familiar with that and have consumed a lot of those invited events along with us. Don't pretend like, don't step away from it. We've all been there and done that.
Yeah, I did. There's a funny story there. One fine day, and I think this was in the middle of 2010, if I'm right, I got an email from a friend of mine sending me your blog's link and saying, wow, nice work on the blog, right? And I looked at that and I was like, what is this person talking about? Yes, I did launch a food blog, but that's not my link, right? And I went to the About section. Turns out there's a common history there. We both grew up in the UAE. We both went to Philadelphia. We were, in fact, living in the same city a few blocks away from each other.
And you both resemble each other.
Yeah. Trying
Did
to
you
analyze
not have a
that
photo on your blog?
No, she didn't.
I think I had an image of Garfield, maybe.
Yeah, and I don't think you had your name there either. And so a friend of mine who saw that looked at that and thought, oh, this is Chirag. Like, obviously, it's the exact same story.
And that's me thinking that I'm unique. That's fantastic.
I mean, it was so weird to read that About page, and then I remember I shot you an email, right, or I contacted you on the forum.
Yeah, so at that time when we were all hanging out, food blogging was sort of, you felt like you were being a pioneer. A lot of places were throwing out free invites. We felt like we were, all the jazz. I was going for a lot of this, but after a point, and it was very quickly, I just started to be quite demotivated. I didn't want to write about the same stuff that everyone would write about. So we'd get invited to something and then the whole world is talking about exactly the same thing. I also found I wasn't getting passionate about writing about some of these things. Not because the food wasn't good, but I just couldn't find a connection. I hadn't found these places. I was being invited there. They just didn't resonate with me. For me, the things that typically resonate with me are the ones that I personally find after hunting them down. And I realized that those were the things that would inspire me to come back and write a blog post. My writing started to become very focused on this idea of a journey before the meal. And it's something that I've always done when I lived in Philadelphia, in New York. I just didn't realize that would also inspire me from a writing angle. Now, somewhere around, I want to say it was September of 2011, I reached this point where I was becoming really obsessed with this idea of wanting to take people from restaurant to restaurant, not just this monologue that happens on the blog. I wanted to start having a dialogue with people about the places that I loved. And I remember having this conversation with my dad one day. I walked up to him, I was very, very serious, and I said, I feel really bad because I think about food 8 hours of the day and I probably shouldn't be getting getting paid. And he said, I think you should try a little bit harder, because I just joined his company. This was my dream to always work with him. So it was like a very, very big thing. And I remember, I think it was that day or a couple of days down the line, on the drive back home, I was talking to Shaban, who is now my husband. I just mentioned this, I was like, if I could do whatever I wanted in the world, I would just leave everything and I would take people to the restaurants I love. And he's like, well, why don't you? I'll drive the bus. And so over the next 45 minutes between Alcoz and Al Riga, we essentially spoke about why this idea was possible with him in, driving the bus from restaurant to restaurant. By then the seed was planted. I was, just constantly thinking, I was obsessing over this idea. Within a couple of months, Farida had just got married. Everybody at home was really happy. And I was like, let me just try throwing this bombshell back out again and see what the reaction was. And the second time around, which was in Feb of 2012, it was super positive. My parents were, now they realized, okay, I had thought about it. They were extremely, as they always are, very supportive. And that's when I thought, okay, I'm going to start my own food tourism company. And how hard can that be?
Farida, when you were listening to this as someone who was being brainstormed with as an idea, what was your take on it at that time?
So, actually, Arva and I never brainstormed about this. I knew she was food blogging, but I was caught up in a lot of wedding prep madness. So I had no idea that Arva wanted to start her own food tourism company and get out of food blogging. So when she finally told me this, it was actually really a surprise. But I love that I've been such an unwitting part of this journey. It took my getting married for my dad to get sentimental and say, let, my daughters live their dream. And then again, Arva went through a really tough time. The whole year in the lead up to getting the license was excruciatingly difficult for her. And I had, I would say, ringside seats. So she kept me in the loop about all the challenges that she was going through, everything from someone running away with office rent money, never to be seen again, to having to jump through these immense hoops just to get formalities out of the way, because no one had ever done a food tourism company before. For me, things got real, I think, somewhere around December 2012. Arva, I remember, called me one morning, and as everyone who knows me knows, I'm quite a late riser, unlike Arva. She caught me off guard. I was waking up, and she was absolutely distressed. So I asked her, I'm like, calm down, what's happened? And she said, I've jumped through every hoop possible, but I finally come across a challenge that I cannot overcome, and I will not be able to get my license, which means I cannot open this company. And I said, okay, what's the problem? She says, now they tell me that to get a tourism license to do this, I either need to have some tourism experience or have done a course in tourism or have somebody on the team.
Like you need a certificate.
Yes. And up until this point of time, this was Arva's solo dream. This was something she was going to do all by herself. This is news to me about Shaban being a bus driver, but I'm glad she had that. In my sleep, I told her, I'm like, why are you worried? I said, I have a tourism certificate. If you've heard Arva speak, it's not often that my sister is rendered speechless. And I had that opportunity with her. She was speechless. And after a few seconds of silence, she said, what, say that again? I said, yes, I did hospitality in Switzerland and I decided to also get a certificate in tourism. And she said, oh my God, this is incredible. Let me call you back. And then again, she calls me back and she says, Farida, if you don't mind, if it's okay with you, you won't have to do anything at all. You will just be
famous last words.
A name on the paper. Can I just list you as a general manager? Because then I will be able to go ahead with Frying-Pan Adventures. And I said, yeah, of course, it's not a problem. And no complaints. From name on the paper, then Arva went on to saying, Farida, I will do all the tours. Can you handle the back end, the emails that come in?
Just the emails.
The media inquiries, etc. I said, okay, Arva, no problem at all. A couple of months later, and after Arva had suffered from laryngitis, I think twice, she's like, it would be really nice because you also love food. Why don't you start?
No, that's not what happened. What happened was I knew I wanted Farida to be doing tours because I didn't trust anyone else, right? And she knows her stuff. But I couldn't ask her that because now that's pushing it too far. And I want people who are really passionate. I want them to be like, I want to do the tour. So I had to bring Farida to that point. So I told Farida, I said, can we just start looking for people, right? It was this anonymous people that we would look for who would come and be food tour guides. We went through a summer of some really painful interviews, which I wanted Farida to go through this because I remember after one particularly really painful interview. Candidate walked out. Farida was like, oh my God, I'm so done with this. Like, I should just do the tours. And I'm thinking, bingo.
Yeah, wow, ladies and gentlemen, this is what you call inception.
Yeah, this is quite an elaborate ploy to get away with start doing it. What I'm hearing right now is, Farida, like, over 5 years, everything has changed except your title.
Essentially.
Everything.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
And actually my complete title, because Arva was very smart right at the beginning, and I have to commend her on this. Initially itself, on the license is General Manager, but Arva has always tutored me as General Manager and Special Events Lead.
Because that just opened...
in the first year itself, when we had no clue that we would ever be getting into special events. So she covered ground right there. So whenever the first inquiry for special event came up, Arva was like, oh, guess what? That's in your job title as well.
I mean, anyway, the general manager is exactly that. General.
This is an interesting space to find out how you've been doing so far.
I need to revisit this job title. Leave it as general manager on visa and for all purposes on the license, but get something a little bit more specific. So this organic kind of inception ruse doesn't keep happening.
One of the things that she mentioned as well is, you guys were essentially the first, you were a category that did not exist when it came to getting registered.
In Dubai.
In Dubai, yeah. What was that like, coming across that kind of barrier? Although Dubai has some space and has had space in terms of these free zones and all these other things, but we're talking 5 years ago. How did that play out? How did you get that turned around?
There was a general lack of knowledge out there, which was incredibly frustrating. And honestly, the whole process could have been so much faster. It's just that because we didn't know, we just kept going back over and over again and being sent back every time for something additional because we didn't fully understand these requirements. You see, the requirements, the legislation is actually written for big tourism companies. There are requirements like you need a manager with 3 years tourism experience. That's essentially throwing out newcomers, new ideas. So you could, for example, start a really small tour guiding services company, but for that, your tour guide manager has to have 3 years tourism experience. Right. All of these things are just, they're big hurdles. They're not explained. There's no easy way. I think now it's different. Everything is different. The whole process of getting your license, people there are easier to sort of speak to. At the time, I was hunting around on the internet, trying to call. I would be one of the few women who would walk into the DTCM legislation office. And it was just this process. I didn't even know that I needed to start a company. I thought I just needed to be a tour guide because it was just a solo thing. I'd get my tour guide license and everyone that I spoke to said, yeah, you can get a tour guide license, you can do tours. I went through the entire process, it was only a 2-week licensing process. They, say you've passed, yes, get the license, and then a list of fines. And one of the fines is basically that if you do tours independently without a company backing you, then you have a big bill to pay at the end of the month. Right. And I was thinking, wait, how did no one say this the whole time? Right. Because we've been discussing this issue throughout the course. So there were lots of these issues of like back and forth. I stopped talking about food tourism as an idea. I would just say, I want to start a tour company. Because otherwise people would say, what? Restaurant? This ridiculousness around new ideas. And I honestly found it incredibly, incredibly frustrating.
Okay, so let's move to the next frustrating thing that comes after that, because this is something that any entrepreneur has to deal with, right? Finding your customers. You're trying to find customers in a category that does not exist. You guys got around all of these different hurdles. January 2013, we're here, you've started it. How do you get people convinced to do this next?
So let me say this, that we actually had things play out very differently. We had customers even before we launched. We were very lucky. Through 2012, when I had first had that naive idea, I thought I will launch next month.
Right.
I was very public on social media, very small group of followers, but I was still very public that I'm going to launch, and then, oops, I'm not because this happened, so next. Okay, and then next. And I didn't realize it was not something that I sat there and consciously made this media strategy, but essentially what was happening was people were going on this journey and becoming really invested in this idea that we will start a food tourism company. So you see, the word started to spread even before we opened. And I remember in December, there was a food blogger. Her name is Lara Dunstan. And I thought, there's just a food blogger, and on Twitter, and she has all these questions and she has this deadline. And I'm like, whoa, I food blog as well. Like, I've never taken my work so seriously. And she's like, you need to answer these questions before this time. And I was like, oh, okay, fine, I'm going to get you the answers. It was about the tourism company. And then, New Year's, and we still don't have a license, and things are still dragging out. Jan 2nd, actually, I remember Jan 2nd in the morning, I start getting an emails from London. Hey, we'd like to book a tour. Where do we book? And I was like, what? I've not marketed. I've not done anything. I don't even have license. I remember responding to one of the first of those emails saying, I haven't really launched, but how do you know about this business? And the lady responded back saying, oh, you don't know? You've just been mentioned in the Telegraph.
Wow, that's big.
It blew my mind away. So Lara Dunstan had written this article on 36 hours to spend in Dubai, and she had inserted us at 12 p.m., which is not really where we would do a food tour, but it doesn't matter. Like, she had put us there, and actually that kept us busy for the first 3 months. It continued, and to date, I'll have people listing the Telegraph as their source of information.
That's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, and especially people do come here a lot for tourism, so they are always looking for these kind of things, and which is why I think as well, obviously thanks to the fact that you guys are doing great work, you keep getting this sort of certificate of excellence and or other things to do in Dubai, or among the top things to do in Dubai. So that's
Yeah, but I'm also going to add over here, I think Arva's stint in the food blogosphere really, really helped. So the food bloggers, as you know, are a pretty tight-knit community, and we had been active in Twitter festivals that were back, really huge back in the day. There were Bake Fest, etc. And the community has really stood by us. We have some long-standing friends like yourself. People like Sally Prosser deserves a special mention. So already they were following Arva's journey, and as soon as she launched the tours, not only did they come, but anytime they had family or friends visiting, they would book.
So
anytime they had a special occasion. I mean, I think one of the first special events we did was Sally's birthday tour.
Yeah, and Sarah Walton has come back, Mina, there's just too many names to mention,
Yes.
but if anyone's listening, hey,
All
thanks to
hardcore,
everybody. Yeah.
all hardcore loyalists.
Let's come to today now. We're in 2018. You guys are at 5 years, right? That's quite a huge deal as well. So talk to us about where you guys are today.
So last when I checked, we've done over 850 tours, and we've served close to around 7,300 guests on some of our standalone experiences. We also do a lot of partner experiences. And honestly, when you look at those numbers, they're really, really tiny in a market that deals with mass market experiences. That's nothing. Like, someone would finish that kind of number in 2 months, maybe less,
But a regular tour, you mean?
Yeah, like regular city tours. I mean, if you just pick up most of the destination management companies, they would be shocked that our numbers are
Or even
so low.
compared to desert safaris, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you pick anything like that. I mean, easily within a month, I would think.
But having said that, Arva, at least for the first 2.5 years, it was just Arva and I. And now we have Stephanie and Nahla and Tanya as well. So when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, we are a bit of a niche company, not because we plan on being so, but it is what it is. It is quite organic. But given that we're only a very small team of trail hosts versus having a huge number on their staff.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, I mean, this is also because we are limiting our capacity. We don't want large groups. We don't want too many tours running in a day. We really want it to feel very organic and not touristy in any way. One of the early journalists who wrote about us said something that really resonated with me. I've never forgotten it. And that's kind of a guiding principle for me, which is frying pans. Tourists hate other tourists.
That's true.
Wow.
And I'll also say this because we are essentially a family-run business and our whole team is like a family. We are not just serving a client or a customer or a guest. This is literally, for us, how someone would walk into your own home and you feed them. You're forging a bond with them. So a lot of our guests and us, we actually keep in touch.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, it is a very niche kind of thing as well, right? It is not a very regular touristy experience. I mean, when you compare, yourself to, say, something like a desert safari, at a single time, 50 people from one tour company alone are attending that thing. And you guys are not doing that, obviously, right? You guys are doing something that's much more smaller, much more niche, which brings me to that part as well, right? Like, how do you guys hire? Because what your passion is for food, and sure, there are tons of people that have passion for food, but passion about food, writing about food is still different from taking someone through a cultural journey about it. And so it's one thing for Arva to take her passion, make it into a company, and then do a tour. Although still tough, but at least within the scope to say, okay, I'm going to drag my sister into this because she's seen that passion in me and she can communicate that. But then how do you take that to other tour guides as well?
Initially, for Arva and I, we're control freaks and we do have trust issues because this is very, very close to our hearts. So hiring was not easy. Luckily for us, we do get in quite a few applications through our website or even people who've actually been on our tours. Again, it has happened organically. We really, really vet every candidate out. We do a couple of rounds of interviews as well. We have very special interviews. So anyone applying to be a trail host actually has to take us out for a meal and walk us through the meal. Once they pass those several tests, then yes, we go ahead. So that's what happened with Stephanie, Nahla, and Tanya. They resonated with our vision. They understood what we are about, and their passion for food and the stories that surround that food runs as deep as ours does.
So we don't go by resumes. I don't even often look at the resume. I glance over it right before and maybe after the interview. What was a game changer for us was an idea suggested by Mohammad Somji, who co-runs Gulf Photo Plus. He said, Arva, why don't you have a questionnaire on your website? And at the time, I just sort of poo-pooed over the idea. I'm like, another thing that I have to create, another one of those ideas that people come up with. How do they know my business? I actually went back, created the questionnaire. And the questionnaire is quite nuanced in the sense it targets exactly the things I would want to know. So right off the bat, someone who goes through the process of answering those questions is already self-selecting because they're invested in getting to the end of that questionnaire. Right. But also it helps us really suss out candidates pretty quickly. And I've really found the caliber of people who apply have become very, very strong over time. It's become people who really understand our business. Both, for example, Tanya and Nahala came to us after they had done our tours already. Also, word of mouth is spreading. And then, as Farida said, we have a pretty strict first round process, which is I have 3 hours in Dubai, only 3 hours. I've never been here. Pick the one restaurant alone in any part of the country that you will take me to. Right. You're going to order the dishes. We'll handle the bill, but you need to know everything about everything at that restaurant. And then we'll also pick a random place about a week before that visit. Let's say, talk to me about the food of Uzbekistan. When we meet at the restaurant, you're going to have to be an expert on Uzbekistan. I want to see where you're going to go for research. The people who are on our team, we've been pretty blown away actually by, I remember when Hala, I had given her Morocco, she not only found the neighborhood, which I thought was totally hidden, that was my little Moroccan food neighborhood, she actually created a little box of goodies. This. She cooked couscous and all of this. I'm like, you realize that I can't even accept this on the interview. And I looked at this box, I'm like, where did you buy that box from? It's so beautiful. And she said, I made it.
And that's how Nahla got the job. She bribed us.
No, she didn't honestly, but I had the food because I didn't want it to go to waste, but it was fantastic. I mean, the level of effort and investment that went into it was really incredible.
This is something that you can't entirely teach as well, right? Like some of it has to, I mean, you can refine it for them. You can take it from 80 to 90% maybe, but you can't deal with someone who's at 50%.
Exactly. Right off the bat. Has the person called up in advance? They have certain dishes that they wanted you to try. You cannot make out whether you want to hang out with someone for 4 hours eating with them over a conference table. It's got to be at a restaurant, it's got to be over food because that's how our guests will meet them. So we may as well see them in that situation.
What is the one thing, if you have to pinpoint in the last 5 years, that you're like absolutely proudest of?
So for my part, the fact that Arva and we don't fight running a company. And anyone who knows us as siblings in our personal lives will know how we are. It's not easy working in a family business, and it's especially not easy for two siblings to work together. I mean, you would expect ego clashes or things like that, but thanks to our parents who keep us real, of course, and touch wood. Yeah, I'm actually really proud of that as an accomplishment more than anything else.
And we worked on that. It doesn't just come that easy. Like, of course, your siblings, of course, you're going to have.
We don't always see eye to eye.
But we've had pretty explicit conversations, I think, about it. Yeah, so that's, how do I top that now?
I was actually going to say, I'm like, you don't get to piggyback off of it. You have to come
Okay, I'll tell you. So I am really proud about the fact that we have built some incredible relationships with people on the street without having written contracts. Sort of in some cases not even explain to a vendor what we're about to do because we just didn't even know how to explain to them. There's some restaurants where it's their culture to serve a lot of food and you're getting tasting portions of things. These are restaurants that they've become a part of our extended family. I'll give you an example. We are allowed special access to see how kunafa is being made. I had a group, I had shown them all of this and, went back home. Next week I come back and the guy who's making the kunafa, tells me that, one of the people on your last group was a tour guide. And she came back with a group of people and she wanted the same access. And I said, no, that's only for Arva. And I'm looking at him like, you just turned away business. You could have maybe started a whole set of competing relationships. You didn't need my permission. There was so much respect. I've had one of our other restaurants call me up and say, this TV team contacted me. Should I do it? I'm like, of course you should do it. He's like, no, but it's not coming with you. Usually I'm the one who brings them like media or whatever. I was just so touched. And there are so many instances of that when something happens, like let's say for whatever reason, rent is too high, something has to shut or a person has to leave. Like I actually feel deep pain because these are not just servers or cooks or whatever. They are part of our extended family. These are people who are serving us the food that we so love and respect.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are talking about that and I'm thinking to myself, like sometimes you don't even get that kind of relationship when you have an agreement in place, right? So there are so many times when people happily violate agreements even though you've sat there and signed stuff with them.
Yeah, like one of the examples is one of the guys, I remember I landed up at the tour, my wallet was empty. I hadn't put in the petty cash that day and I was like, Abu Ahmed, I don't have money. This sucks. Like, this is so embarrassing. And he's like, relax. I'm like, no, it's not okay. Like, what am I going to do? And he's like, just relax. You can pay me next time. It's okay. And then he proceeds to open up the cash register. And he's like, how much money do you need for the rest of the tour? I was just blown away. I was like, what? And he was ready to just give me a loan that day for whatever I needed.
So we were just talking about like the restaurants, right? Which is more, if I can separate them out as being your internal partnerships. Talk to us a little bit about now the external ones as well, right? You guys have been doing brilliant work with companies like Gulf Photo Plus, Royal Shaheen. And what is it you guys seek out when you try to do these things, and then what are you actually building with them?
So I think Gulf Photo Plus was one of the first community partners that we signed up with. What we do with them is unseen walks. So these are all about showcasing unseen parts of Dubai, and they are essentially photography and food trails. After that, I think we partnered with Royal Shaheen, who are experts in everything bird of prey, and we run a very unique offbeat desert safari experience with them in a part of the desert that very few companies have permission to venture into. We have also now partnered with Asila, which is located at the Radisson by the Creek in Dera, and we offer with them an interactive Emirati cooking demo and lunch as well. So we're really, really lucky to have these partners on board. And I think one of the first things we look for when we're partnering with people is like-mindedness. I mean, you obviously want a partner who understands what you're doing and can work with you into building what you want to offer to your guests. So in our case, we want to offer really unique experiences. I know that word is bandied about a lot, but we try to stay true to it as much as possible. So we want to offer out experiences, first of all, which are not easily available in the city, experiences that will be enviable, that will encourage other people out there to copy us. And we're actually not afraid of emulation. They say that imitation is the best form of flattery, but for us, the more that people start showcasing the hidden parts of Dubai, the more celebrated these vendors, these people who form the city will be.
I would also say that we look at how they think about customers. For us, it's very important because they are an extension of our family, of our team, and their thought process around how to treat a guest and how to approach customer service is so critical for us, because we want the customer to go back thinking not just this was a cool tour, but this was a memorable experience. Ideally, this was a memorable experience of a lifetime. Like, that's actually the goal that we aspire to, and I feel there's a lot of like-mindedness on that with the people that we've already worked with.
How do you ensure the quality of the tour and the experience, right? I'm sure, of course, you're working closely with the partners and stuff, but you guys have sort of the Frying-Pan brand of experiences that you guys are delivering, right?
In some cases, we are physically present on the experience. So with Unseen Trails, we have physically been there and we will always physically be there. With Royal Shaheen, for example, we went through a process where we would join them on the experience. We all kind of figured out how the other likes to work. And then at some point, we know that we can kind of just hand off because we've seen how they function. I think at the end of the day, customer feedback is the best thing to go with. We are so particular about sending people emails after they've done the experience. And we also, to the extent possible, if we have any information, and this we definitely do on our food walks, sometimes with the partner experiences we don't really, we try to customize these emails. So for all those 7,000 plus guests that we've sent emails to, there's usually a couple lines in there which is actually targeted to them. It's something we discussed, it's something we heard about from the partner. So we really do try actually to do that. And that is our biggest indicator. You've got to watch customer feedback. They have been critical in our R&D process.
What would be Frying-Pan's next challenge now? You guys have got tours going, you've got people who are working with you, partnerships, tour guides. So what's next?
The next step for us is corporates and residents. That's our big focus now. We have not had the capacity as a team to be able to focus on anything other than essentially what is walk-in traffic. We've never had the luxury of having time to actually go after people and, get business. And now we finally have a team that can sit there and craft experiences. We want to be able to do something that is targeted to companies, especially new employees who are joining. We want to give them a better taste, a more well-rounded taste of the city, but also our residents. Our residents have been so supportive. Which company? So many of our tours have residents on them. And people always find that surprising. I don't know what the ratio is, maybe 20% residents, 30% residents.
I think when we began, it was mostly tourists because residents don't really check TripAdvisor. And the few residents we got was because they had people visiting and bringing them in. But now, I think it's an even toss-up between the two.
I think on Farida's, on the Indian tours, it's primarily residents.
I do get a lot. In fact, special shout out to Jenny Blanksby. She's done she's done the Little India tour 5 times. So she, ever since we started,
she's
including twice last year, it's amazing. We have such amazing guests. There are so many residents like that. So big thank you. But yes, we are currently working on a resident club program because a lot of residents have reached out to us with the same question. What next? They've done all our tours. They want us to start doing something new. We are working on curating more bespoke experiences targeted at residents. So things like maybe pop-up events in the future, special edition food walks and other events.
What we want to do is we want to create an annual calendar of very quick and dirty experiences. This is what we've heard. Residents don't have much time. They want stuff that is not, that doesn't kill their budget. And actually, we are always doing research as a team. We are a team that loves food stories. For example, one of the places I write for is Friday Magazine, and there are a lot of connections that come out of that. There are a lot of stories that come out of that, which I want to share with the residents. For example, we met this cultural anthropologist and coffee historian. She's this incredible Emirati storyteller who lives in Alain. People should be able to meet with her and learn about coffee from her and walk to the tree where Sheikh Zayed was sitting under the tree. My mind was blown when I spent time with her, and all I could think was, I want to take that resident and that person and that person. They would love this. So we want to start converting a lot of the research that we do. We want to make them into these quick and dirty experiences that people can just go behind the scenes as we do and experience it.
Let's talk now about the Frying-Pan Diaries. First of all, why a podcast? You guys are now Dubai's first food podcast. What made you think of doing a podcast?
Because you were doing a podcast.
Really?
Okay, now I'm speechless and I run 4 shows.
Totally kidding. No. I think Mohammed Somchi gets credit for this one as well because he had sent me this podcast called The Splendid Table. He sent it to me in 2016. I remember listening to this and saying, oh, that's interesting. And then I started getting addicted to it. And then I was completely addicted to it. And I suddenly realized, wow, this is a whole incredible world. Up until that point, I always thought that video was the only medium. And I found video challenging. A lot of people have told us, why don't you start a YouTube channel? Why don't you start a show? Honestly, I just find it really difficult because in terms of finding the people, in terms of the budget, even if you do something really simple, DIY style, you can't be behind the camera and holding the camera. And I don't mean a selfie stick, okay? I was listening to these podcasts and I'm thinking, they're so rich in information, no visuals as a distraction. I don't need to be worrying about the person who is, dealing. I don't need an audio manager. We can record, we can edit, we can do everything. We are not dependent on anybody. That was key for us.
There's even a huge cognitive overload to trying to do video, right? Because it's not just the voice and the scene, it's also the surrounding, the environment, what's behind you, how you look. There is a whole added layer to video. And that's in addition to distraction. I don't watch a lot of videos myself. I mean, that's the reason I'm podcasting, is because for me, that's the medium that works. I can listen to it anywhere. I can listen to it while I'm doing something else, while driving, whatever. But there's so much, there's an ease to it.
Podcasts have been around for a long time, but they're trending again now. And whatever trends in the US and UK will trend here within 2 to 3 years' time. And so we thought, if this is the format we want to go, we want to move towards it fast because it's very, very early. Same like blogging. Podcasting here is like what blogging was back in 2010. You don't get on it now, you will just be part of the clutter later on.
So I'm going to quickly jump in over here. I know Arva kept saying we thought we had...
Well, you're a general manager, so...
Yeah. What Arva means to say is that the idea was implanted in her head by Mohammad Somji, and she was already miles ahead in the thought process. And then one day the call comes in. Farida, I want to start a podcast.
It usually, yes.
So what's the response been like for you guys so far? You guys have been on now, what?
We started last October. End of September was our trailer.
It's been 6 months, yeah.
It's been amazing, the growth has been very slow, as I think it tends to be in this world, unless you sort of hit one of those lists, or you get mentioned on someone else's podcast and then suddenly it explodes. I really thought at the beginning that a grand total of 6 people were listening to our podcast, with maybe...
Including our parents.
5 of them must have been mom trying to hit the replay button wrong 5 times. No, God bless them. They really were our first supporters. The thing is, I had this meeting with somebody quite senior. I was just mentioning, it's a little frustrating. I mean, we're such a small, we put in so much work into these shows, and I feel like only 6 people are listening. And he said, no, it's not about the numbers. Do you know who's listening? And I was like, not really. He said, let me tell you. I had this meeting with, there was a CFO of some company that had come in. He said, we never have anything to talk about. It's a very cut and dry meeting. And it turns out that day, we ended up talking like 15 plus minutes about your podcast, because he listens to your podcast too. And we both had listened to the last episode. And I was really stunned. I really didn't expect that at all. And now I start getting messages from people. Hey, I'm at this restaurant. Thank you so much for recommending. Someone messaged me when they had just reached after turning their car midway. They had going back from office to home. And he heard the episode on Palestinian Manusha. And he's like, I can't go home. I need this now. And that is so fulfilling.
But that's what you want, right? That's why you're doing this, right?
And it's been so fascinating, because I remember meeting with a friend who is a sound engineer, and he sat me down at a restaurant one day when he was, I was asking him, like, just give me the download on this. And he said, Arva, for a change, when you walk into a restaurant now, just close your eyes and listen. And that's all you need to do, is just start listening. So, I'd always written about food, tasted it, all of that, touched it. But how do you make someone experience food just through their ears? That was a whole other ballgame, and it's been fascinating.
But I also think it's very romantic. This whole spate of videos going viral. I mean, it's all nice, but with a video, you have to pause, take the time, and actually view it. But I find podcasting to be a little bit romantic. The whole idea of going back to a time where you just listen to stories being told to you, and you can just let your imagination wander and, color in the pictures. There's something very nice about it. And it's so easy, because for me now, whenever I cook, I'll have a podcast on.
Yeah, but I do think it's still very early stages for us. From the people who are listeners, they are very, very committed and give us feedback. But I think we have so much of a ways to grow before we can actually really gauge what reaction is.
How much work goes into, and I'm saying this from my own personal experience as well, right? Most of the stuff I do is essentially people talking, right? It's stuff like this. It's not even trying to go to a restaurant and capture what's going on in the kitchen, right? So when you're putting out an episode, which is about 30 minutes, 35 minutes, what do you do to get that?
Just a couple of seconds here and there, Chirag.
Yeah. It's that simple, isn't it? You guys covered Grub Shack, I think, in one of the earliest episodes, right? And although a restaurant I can eat very limited stuff at now, but I remember them in Sharjah, right? When they had opened, and loved the place. So when you guys did that, and you guys captured like the sounds in the kitchen.
Oh, this is the lethal stuff.
Yeah, so this is the main thing when you put in your green chilies.
I feel like I'm standing in their kitchen right now, because you hear the clicking on the tawa. It sounds great because it's like, oh wow, they just went there and put a mic in the kitchen. Like, it's not that simple, obviously, right?
No, so again, just to add my thing over here, Arva and I, we have a little secret. We're actually a couple of witches with wands, and we wave it and these awesome things happen. But having said that, again, all credit to Arva. She put in a lot of research over the last year, especially during the summer. She taught herself everything about podcasting, A to Z. I come back from a trip to India and Arva is now a sound editing wizard and she's talking...
Thanks to Simon. I'm going to give a shout out to Simon.
She's talking this language and throwing these words at me that initially I had no idea. We're talking at one-way mic, two-way mic, and she started saying pop filter. Now, I'm the older sister, and I don't know what a pop filter is. I was too lazy to look it up. I didn't want to ask her. But for the longest time, I thought she was talking about a new photo filter on Instagram. Pop filter.
Awesome.
So, and I was like, you know what? She only wants my voice, so I don't have to bother with these technicalities. She's doing all the editing, going into the restaurants, all of that work. I don't have to learn. And again, in Arva style, thanks to her, now she's taught me as well how to edit. There is a lot of work that goes into it because for us as well, we have to do a lot of research. So before we go into a restaurant or decide to interview someone, we need to make sure that we know as much about them as possible. We have to plan schedules with the restaurants, with the people we want to interview, make sure that we do a list of questions, try to keep the interviews tight or the restaurant segments tight as well. So our editing is not a nightmare. And then, putting it all together.
Yeah, and I think we're still playing around with format. We're still also playing around with recording techniques. There's been a lot of crash and burn. So example, the Grub Shack one is fantastic because I remember they had one crab left that day, right? And so we went into the kitchen, super excited. At that time, I had only one lapel mic and I had this field recorder, which I would use for getting all the sounds of the tawa and so on. And the lapel mic would be stuck on the interviewee. We started recording, threw in the crabs, like amazing. I'm just thinking, oh my God, this whole episode is so fantastic. And then I didn't turn the recorder on. And, like crab is cooked, it's cooked. I mean, you can't kind of go back. So you just have to leave out the audio or you have to use an audio from another bit and chop it in there. And, so it's a lot of that. Now we know. First you do the interview, then you might have to do the dish 2 or 3 times to get exactly the sounds and then layer it in. So it's been a process of learning.
Finally, so what is one thing today you wish you knew back then, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, whenever, that you had to learn the hard way?
I don't know if I, for my part of the journey, would have redone anything at all because it's been quite a ride. I would do it all over again with all the ups and downs because everything that I have learned is something that I would never have dreamed of and I would never give it up. So no, I wouldn't change a thing, but maybe Arva would.
I think mine is a little bit more personal. It's something that I've been grappling with every year, but I feel this year I'm really just taking it on is this idea of space outside of Frying Pan and all the things that we want to do. It's very difficult when something is your baby to actually turn your brain off. It really does where you are. You can't think properly. You're not at your best thinking ability. You're not going to come up with the best ideas if you can't turn your brain off. Having a team now in place that's larger is giving us the luxury of being able to do that. So maybe the learning would be that I wish we had just focused on building out a stronger team earlier because we are at a stage where 5 years in, we've accomplished so much, but at the same time, I just feel that had we had a team in place, so much more of it would be even more sustainable. The returns would be better for all of the work that we're putting in. And I'm very much the kind of person who tries to take on as much as possible. I think you know that, Chirag. Like when we first started, I was like, I'm going to build my own website, but I'll also build the booking system. I'll code the booking system.
Which you did, actually.
You did.
But the point is that that's not the right answer. You will keep coming up against a wall and like falling down after a point because you're just fatigued.
Yeah.
And there's someone who can do it better, honestly. So I think that's maybe it. Also just going out and looking for solutions that are already there rather than trying to build everything in-house. I'm very much like and I think I get this from my dad. Let's create it from the start. And I don't think that's always necessary.
Well, thanks so much, guys. Before we wrap up, so where can people find out more about Frying Pan Adventures, but also you guys individually?
So, of course, we're very active on social media, Facebook and Instagram as Frying Pan Adventures, on Twitter as Frying Pan Tours. Our podcast is available for download from a lot of the regular podcast apps like the Apple Podcast, there's Stitcher, there's SoundCloud as well.
Google Play Music
Google
for
Play.
people in US and Canada.
Yeah, Frying-Pan.fm is where you can listen to it if you don't want to tune into a dedicated podcast app. And as for Arva, do you have any personal social media
I have
handles?
no personal life.
For me, I'm at Farida A on Twitter and Instagram.
Oh, I always thought it was Farida. I didn't know it was Farida A.
There's so much we still learn about each other as sisters. It's incredible.
If you haven't listened in to our podcast, make sure you do. If you haven't come on a tour, we'd love to feed you.
So there'll be links to all of this fun stuff in the show notes, of course. But thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chirag.
No, can I just get would it be okay if I just quickly ran and got my sticky note? I just forgot my sticky note.